In a galaxy teeming with powerful species vying for supremacy, humans were about to defy all expectations. They were poised to demonstrate that true strength wasn't about sheer size or brute force, but about resilience forged in the crucible of a challenging world. Their story was one of shattered records, astonished aliens, and a complete redefinition of what it meant to be unstoppable. The message arrived through standard communication channels, though warning might have been too strong a word. It was more akin to a demand, a rather boisterous one at that. This was Earth's inaugural encounter with extraterrestrial life, and it began with a resounding declaration: "People of Earth, the Garano fleet has arrived." The voice resonated with an exaggerated echo, the sort that suggested an excessive attempt at gravitas. Inside the United Nations' hastily assembled First Contact Command Center, Commander Lane Ferris squinted at the blurry holographic image of the self-proclaimed Garano fleet commander. The alien figure was draped in what resembled a cloak fashioned from highly reflective material, and, inexplicably, his head was adorned with something Lane could only describe as otherworldly antlers. "Is he serious?" Lane muttered, glancing at his colleague, Professor Carver Quaid. Quaid, a slender man in his 50s with a seemingly endless supply of skeptical expressions, responded with a quiet chuckle. "Unworthy?" Carver echoed, raising a skeptical eyebrow. "Of our resources? That's rich, coming from a guy who looks like he raided a Christmas decoration factory." Lane nodded in agreement, barely suppressing a laugh. The Garano commander, apparently oblivious to the amusement he was causing, continued his pompous monologue. He droned on about the Garano Empire's vast power, their unparalleled military might, and how Earth would be a valuable addition to their collection of conquered worlds. He flourished his crystal wand again, this time producing a slightly more impressive, albeit still rather underwhelming, green spark. Lane leaned closer to Carver, whispering, "Is this it? Is this the grand display of galactic dominance we were promised?" Carver snorted. "Seems like it," he replied, adjusting his glasses. "Honestly, my neighbor's kid has a more impressive light show at his birthday parties." The Garano commander's speech reached a crescendo, culminating in a dramatic declaration of impending doom for Earth. He puffed out his chest, clearly expecting a reaction of terror or at least some respectful awe. Instead, he was met with a resounding silence. The humans in the command center exchanged puzzled glances, a collective sense of bewildered amusement hanging in the air. Lane, unable to contain himself any longer, finally broke the silence. "Excuse me," he called out, waving a hand dismissively. "Are we supposed to be quaking in our boots right now? Because frankly, that light stick isn't exactly terrifying." The commander's face contorted in a mixture of disbelief and outrage. Impressed, he sputtered, "You dare mock the might of Garano?" Lane shrugged, fighting back a grin. "Well, yeah," he replied. "If you're planning on conquering a planet, you might want to bring more than a glorified glow stick to the party. It's a bit underwhelming, don't you think?" Carver chimed in, "We have a kid down the block who can melt plastic with a magnifying glass. So unless you've got something a bit more substantial than a cosmic disco ball, you might want to rethink this whole invasion thing." A wave of suppressed laughter rippled through the command center. Several officials coughed into their fists, trying to maintain a semblance of composure. The Garano commander, clearly unaccustomed to such disrespect, turned a shade of green that clashed horribly with his shimmering cloak. He spluttered indignantly, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. This is your response to the power of Garano?" Lane leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head, a smirk playing on his lips. "Yeah, pretty much," he said casually. "Thanks for the performance. We appreciate the effort, but we're good." The commander slammed his crystal staff onto whatever surface he was standing on, the light flickering pathetically. "This isn't over," he roared. "You will regret this mockery." With that, the screen went black, leaving the command center in stunned silence for a moment before erupting in a cacophony of laughter. "Oh, we are so going to regret this," Lane chuckled, rolling his eyes. He turned to Carver, shaking his head. "Aliens travel across the galaxy just for that? Seriously?" Carver shrugged. "Guess we'll see if their bite is as impressive as their bark," he replied dryly. Lane's expression hardened, but the smirk remained. "They can bring whatever they want," he said, a hint of steel in his voice. "Let's just see who regrets it more." The Garano commander, seemingly oblivious to the burgeoning amusement he was inspiring, pressed on with his self-aggrandizing speech. He rambled about the Garano Empire's extensive reach, their unmatched military prowess, and how Earth would become a prized possession within their ever-growing dominion of subjugated planets. He brandished his crystal wand once more, this time conjuring a slightly more visually stimulating, though still rather unimpressive, greenish flicker. Lane leaned towards Carver, murmuring, "Is this the extent of it? This the grand exhibition of interstellar supremacy we were led to anticipate?" Carver scoffed. "Apparently," he replied, adjusting his spectacles. "My neighbor's son puts on a more dazzling pyrotechnics display for his birthday celebrations." The Garano commander's oration reached its apex, culminating in a theatrical pronouncement of Earth's imminent demise. He thrust his chest outward, clearly anticipating a display of terror, or at the very least, a modicum of reverent awe. What he received instead was a stark silence. The humans within the command center exchanged perplexed looks, a shared sense of baffled amusement permeating the air. Lane, no longer able to contain himself, finally shattered the silence. "Pardon me," he interjected, waving a hand dismissively. "Are we meant to be trembling in fear at this juncture? Honestly, that illuminated stick isn't particularly frightening." Lane leaned closer to Carver, whispering, "Is this all there is? Is this the grand spectacle of interstellar dominance we were promised?" Carver snorted. "Apparently so," he responded, adjusting his spectacles. "My neighbor's child puts on a more dazzling pyrotechnics display at his birthday parties." The Garano commander's monologue reached its peak, ending in a dramatic pronouncement of Earth's impending destruction. He puffed up his chest, clearly expecting a display of fear, or at the very least, a degree of reverent awe. Instead, he was met with complete silence. The humans within the command center exchanged bewildered looks, a shared sense of confused amusement permeating the room. Lane, no longer able to contain himself, finally broke the silence. "Excuse me," he interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "Are we meant to be trembling with fright right now? Because, to be honest, that glowing stick isn't exactly terrifying." The commander's face twisted into a grimace of disbelief and indignation. Impressed, he sputtered. "You dare to scoff at the might of Garano?" Lane shrugged, suppressing a grin. "Well, yes," he replied. "If you intend to conquer a planet, you might want to bring more than a glorified glow stick to the fight. It's a tad underwhelming, don't you agree?" Carver chimed in, "There's a youngster down the street who can melt plastic with a magnifying glass. Unless you possess something a bit more formidable than a cosmic disco ball, you might want to reconsider this whole invasion idea." A wave of stifled laughter rippled through the command center. Several officials coughed to cover their amusement, attempting to maintain a semblance of composure. The Garano commander, seemingly unaware of the growing amusement he was generating, persisted in his boastful pronouncements. He rambled on about the Garano Empire's vast territories, their unsurpassed military strength, and how Earth would become a valuable asset among their expanding collection of subjugated planets. He once again flourished his crystal wand, producing a slightly more visually interesting, yet still remarkably underwhelming, greenish glimmer. Lane leaned toward Carver, muttering, "Is this the entirety of their grand demonstration? Is this the awe-inspiring display of interstellar power we were led to expect?" Carver scoffed. "Apparently," he responded, adjusting his spectacles. "The neighborhood children put on more impressive light shows with sparklers on the 4th of July." The Garano commander's speech reached its climax, culminating in a theatrical declaration of Earth's imminent annihilation. He puffed out his chest, evidently anticipating a reaction of terror or, at the very least, some respectful awe. Instead, he was greeted with an absolute silence. The humans within the command center exchanged perplexed looks, a shared sense of bewildered amusement hanging heavy in the air. Lane, unable to restrain himself any longer, finally shattered the silence. "I beg your pardon," he interjected, waving a hand dismissively. "Are we supposed to be cowering in fear at this point? Because, honestly, that illuminated baton isn't particularly intimidating. The battered, rainbow-streaked Garano fleet had taken a significant hit, but they weren't giving up just yet. High above Earth's atmosphere, Tak scowled at the chaotic scene below. His ships were coated in neon paint, littered with confetti, and some even sparked from railgun damage. However, he wasn't about to concede defeat, not yet. "Commander," an officer called out, his voice strained, "we've lost over half of our tactical fleet, and, well, crew morale is significantly compromised." They're not accustomed to this level of ridicule. Tak ground his teeth, his face a mask of grim resolve. Enough of these charades. Deploy the Omega cannon. We will put an end to this mockery now. A hush fell over the Garano command bridge as the Omega cannon powered up, its blue energy core pulsing ominously. The Omega cannon was no ordinary weapon, it was a weapon of last resort, capable of obliterating entire continents with a single blast. Earth's leaders, observing from the ground, gasped as they realized the devastating potential of the weapon. If it fired, there would be no second chances, no more games. In the makeshift Earth Command Center, Lane observed the charging cannon with a steely gaze. "So, that's how they want to play it, is it?" he muttered. "They're resorting to the heavy artillery." "It would appear so," Carver replied, a grim smile spreading across his face. "Fortunately, we still have a few tricks up our sleeves." He turned to Kyle Booker, who was managing the drone army's control center. "Kyle, are you prepared for Operation Bug Spray?" Kyle's face lit up. "Oh, I've been anticipating this moment. All drones, prepare for override." Back in the skies, as the Omega cannon reached full charge, Kyle's drones buzzed into position. With a swift tap, he activated the override, and all remaining drones swarmed the flagship, whirling in endless circles around the Omega cannon. It resembled a cloud of enraged bees descending upon their target, except these bees carried potent magnetic disruptors. The Garano ship systems began to flicker as the magnetic fields took hold. Tak looked around in horror. "What's happening to my ship?" "Sir," one of his officers stammered, they've compromised the Omega cannon's energy core. It's destabilizing." Down on the ground, Rhea Patel's voice crackled over the command line. Well. It seems the big, bad weapon isn't so invincible after all. Let's give it a little nudge, shall we?" With a mischievous grin, Rhea activated Earth's remaining long-range EMP missiles, specifically targeted at the magnetic disruptors now swarming around the Garano flagship. The missiles streaked skyward, cutting through the clouds like silver needles. The moment they struck, the disruptors intensified, forcing the Omega cannon's energy to surge back into itself. Lights exploded across the Garano ship, sparks flying as their systems overloaded. One by one, Tak's officers scrambled desperately, attempting to stabilize the cannon, but it was too late. "Commander Tak," an officer shrieked. "The Omega cannon's feedback loop is irreversible. We need to evacuate." Tak slammed his fists onto his console. "No. I will not be defeated by these human pests." His words were cut off as the Omega cannon finally imploded, taking the flagship and several nearby vessels with it in a blinding flash of blue and white light. From the ground, Earth's defenders watched the explosion, feeling a mixture of triumph and disbelief. Cheers erupted across control centers and streets. Civilians who had been observing from rooftops cheered, danced, and some even uncorked champagne bottles. This was a victory, a messy, chaotic, improbable victory, but a victory nonetheless. "Now that's what I call firepower," Lane said with a smirk, watching the debris rain down from the sky. As the last remnants of the Garano invasion force retreated, Earth's forces vigilantly monitored the monitors, ensuring no unexpected turns. Every screen in the command center displayed the receding blips, inching away from Earth's orbit, their arrogance shattered along with their flagship. The room erupted in applause, cheers, and even a few rogue confetti cannons, courtesy of some overly enthusiastic technicians. Lane observed the scene, arms crossed, as the weary but victorious Earth defense team celebrated. However, amidst the jubilation, he noticed Carver at a terminal, studying the screen with an unusual expression. Carver, Lane inquired, approaching him. What's up? Carver's fingers tapped nervously on the console. One ship hasn't left, he indicated a lone blip hovering stubbornly at the edge of the atmosphere, unwavering and stationary. Lane's smile vanished. Patch me through, he instructed, activating the communication line, his voice calm. Unidentified Garano vessel, you are in violation of the departure order. Identify yourself. A protracted silence ensued, long enough for Lane to consider repeating himself, before a familiar voice crackled over the speakers. Commander Lane, Tack rasped, his voice strained, but no less resentful. I see you have routed my fleet like cowards. Impressive for a backwater planet. Lane grinned, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Still here, Tack? Thought you'd learned your lesson. Oh, I have learned many things, human, Tack retorted, bitterness lacing each word. But surrender is not one of them. In a sudden burst, Tack's ship surged forward, plunging into Earth's atmosphere with a defiant roar. Fire trailed from its damaged hull as it plummeted downwards, directly towards New York City. Is he serious? Carver exclaimed, eyes wide. A kamikaze attack? That's his grand plan? Guess he'd rather go down in a blaze of glory, Lane responded, turning to the command team. Ready the rail guns. We'll show him a blaze he won't forget. Throughout the command center, the celebratory mood abruptly shifted back to focused determination. Rhea Patel swiftly reactivated the rail gun system, recalibrating for the single, rapidly descending target. Her fingers danced across the controls, steady even as alarms blared. Tack's ship hurtled downwards, gaining speed, its trajectory locked onto the heart of Manhattan. Lane gripped the edge of the console, bracing himself. This is it, folks. Hit him with everything we've got. With a unified roar, the rail guns fired, streaks of energy ripping through the air and tearing into Tack's ship from all directions. Panels exploded across the vessel's surface as one hit after another found its mark. Yet, despite the relentless barrage, Tack's ship persisted in its descent, its core glowing an ominous red, now mere seconds from impact. Then, in one final, devastating blast, Rhea hit the primary control, unleashing every remaining rail gun in a last-ditch, all-out assault. The beams converged, creating a colossal surge of energy that obliterated Tack's ship mid-air. The sky blazed in a fiery spectacle, debris scattering harmlessly into the ocean below. As the explosion faded, a stunned silence descended upon the control room. Lane and his team watched as the last remnants of the Garano commander's ship fizzled and dissolved into the Atlantic waves. Tack's final act of defiance had been neutralized. Earth had prevailed. The silence shattered with cheers, louder and more fervent than before. People high-fived, embraced, and laughed, the weight of victory finally setting in. They had faced an alien force superior in technology and numbers, and emerged triumphant. Lane turned to Carver, who was leaning against the console, shaking his head in disbelief. Well, Lane, he said, grinning, looks like humanity has a bit of a bite, after all. Carver chuckled, glancing at the now clear skies. Yeah, guess we're not so easy to bully. Rhea joined them, a smudge of grease on her cheek, looking both exhausted and exhilarated. What do you think, Commander? Ready to update Earth's planetary warning system? Lane smiled, letting the significance of the moment sink in. I think we've sent our message loud and clear, he stated, his voice firm. Any species that tries this again had better be ready for a fight. Because we may not look like much, but when we're pushed, we don't stop until the job is done. Earth's defenders stood in quiet pride, gazing at a sky now free from threats. The message was simple, but undeniable.